that maybe you have a lightning talk that doesn't pertain to everybody, but there's a lot of networking. And to me, that's what a meetup should be. It's not, it should be a group of people getting together and mingling kind of.
Totally.
Anyways, I'm ready to go live when you are. I wanted to ask one question. Is there a way to like toggle between my shared screen and me? Because sometimes it's just like I'm talking and there's this, image up there forever. I know, right? It's a pain in
I
the
know.
ass. Okay, don't worry about it then. Don't worry about it. Maybe I'll figure it out later.
I'd
It literally
say
would be you managing it, or so. There's not like a hotkey where I can go boop 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 or something like that. Or, like OBS has that. You know what I mean? We don't have to do it this time. Maybe I'll figure it out. If you knew something off the hand, but anyways, when I watched the show, the talk afterwards, I'm like, man, that's a lot of just staring at a screen. I mean, I guess we're on the side too, but part of these talks is like, that's why it's really hard for me, because it's actually physically looking at somebody and engaging them is part of giving a talk.
I'd say. Yeah, I mean, pretty much the choice before you would be, if you want to close out of share screen regularly.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's totally up to you.
Seems a little weird. It'd probably be kind of abrupt for people watching to mess their flow up. It's fine.
No, I mean,
I guess like all time.
It's I would say at your discretion, feel free to do so, because I feel you on that. Of like, it is nice to see who's talking in the full screen a little more.
Yes. So, yeah. I just wondered if there was like a hotkey or something where you can toggle between the talker and the shared screen, but I guess not. I mean, I can Google it later. I bet there might be some sort of trick.
Yeah, I mean,
like I've used OBS a little bit where you can toggle that. I'm sure you have using it a little bit.
Well, I wound up opting to not. At some point, there's only so many tabs and windows I can have open.
Yeah.
So I opted to just do Zoom direct to restream, because anything more than that's overheating my computer and making it hard to keep track of what's going on. So.
I understand, and don't do that because it's not worth it. Well, I'll see. I just tried to pull it up and it looked kind of like, it looked funky, like it'd be hard for me to toggle. So maybe I'll just figure it next time. No one's complaining, right?
I'd say, yeah, like I said, feel free to drop out of shared screen.
Okay.
Whenever you feel like you want to just, if you got something you want to connect with more on directly with the viewers, go for that.
Okay.
Looks like we are live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube, embedded on the event page. So, I think we are good to go here. Hello, Nevada County. This is David Clark Carroll of the Nevada County Tech Connection. We're a project of the Economic Resource Council looking at technology and manufacturing in Nevada County. Tonight, we're pleased to have Ethan Hunter back with another in his series of web development workshops. This is our COVID era iteration of the web development meetups. Hopefully you guys will be able to be, talking over code over some pizza and beers here soon enough, but we're real happy to be able to have something going here, and great topic tonight. Without much further ado, Ethan Hunter.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. And sorry I missed you guys last week. Last month I did have something that came up. So if you guys tuned in and I wasn't there, apologize. Anyway, so we're going back to what we had talked about previously. We've been kind of knocking down different things, right? We talked about color, we talked about topography, and different things like that in web design. So now we are going to be talking about images today. So we'll go ahead and jump in here and start the talk. All right, can you see that? Did we share that correctly? Doesn't look like it.
Not yet.
There it is. Okay, sorry about that. Still figuring it out. Okay, it looks like we're good now, right?
Looks good.
Okay, great. All right, so all right, images. We're talking about images. So images are, the saying is right. Images are worth 1,000 words, right? So this is also true for website design and function as well. So choose your words wisely, right? So choose your images wisely. Don't just be like, all right, here's an image. All right, so we're gonna get into that. Images create emotions. They educate, they guide, they communicate, they do lots of things, right? So we're going to explore tonight. We're going to explore how to use them, how to optimize them, and where to get them, or the different tools in which to make your web design and usability, your interface good. All right. So let's get into the use of them. And, here we go. All right, so we have different types of images that we use online, right? But I kind of just chose 4. Those are the basic ones we use, and so we'll get into them. So the first image you see here, me circling, is what we would call a Jpeg image, or usually it's photographs. Okay, so it's most widely used, and when I'm saying like different types here, we're talking about file types, just to clarify. And I'm not going to go into like all the specifics of each of them, just kind of going to give you a basic overview. And if you want to be more informed, there's tons of information out there, so check that out. All right, so getting back to JPEG, so photos, those are the very widely used images online. Okay, and then the next one is, and let's kind of stop back for a second here. There's 2 kind of basic images in web design, right? There is photographs, realistic photos, and then pretty much everything else is going to be animated on some level. So, and then that is even kind of in subcategories, but I'm not going to get real specific about it. So anyways, we talked about photos, talked about images. Now we're going to talk about everything else, and that usually is something graphical. Anyway, so the next image type is going to be PNG. And that a lot of times is like up here, you'll see up on the upper right here, that's a lot of like infographics. Usually it's a little bit bigger in file size than a JPEG, but sometimes not, depending on the type of image you're using. One great thing about PNG is that it supports what we call background image, right? So it basically will allow you to have a transparent image if you want, so no background. So that's kind of cool. It's another, they call it the alpha channel if you want to get particular about it. Yeah, and then of course this dancing crazy guy over here is probably distracting all of us, is a GIF image. And that is, while used in website design, it's not used as often. It was back when websites were first new and everything was a GIF and everything was animated and it was crazy and obnoxious. Luckily, we don't animate websites that often that way anymore. But when you do need something animated, a lot of times you'll use it in a GIF file. All right, so those are what we call raster images, and then there's what we call vector images too. So the next one is going to be the SVG, and the SVG is used but not often because it is a bigger file type. One of the great things about SVG is that it is what we call, and actually it's in the words itself, SVG is scalable vector graphic. So it's very scalable, means you can make it really small and you can make it really big. So that's kind of important when you're using certain things, especially when you blow something up, say like an image, and I don't know if you notice this, but we have pixels and you have all these dots and it gets really blurry. And if you have something that's a line, the line doesn't exactly define anymore and it becomes blurry. Well, the information that's stored in an SVG file is completely different and really allows that file to stay crisp and clean, whether it's really big or really small, okay? So those are the basic images that we use. Typically, I would say that what I use most of the time is a JPEG file. Occasionally, I'll use a PNG, maybe an SVG for logo, but typically not. For me, I'll use an SVG a lot of times when I'm creating some sort of merchandise. So, but that's different than web design. It's more for graphical printing and things like that. So those are the 4 basic ones that I wanted to touch on, okay? All right, so the next part is the use, all right? So this is the bulk of what we're gonna be talking about here, right? So basically, let's see if I can do that right. I stopped my screen share. All right, so images have a purpose. So make sure your images do have a purpose is basically what I'm trying to say. So ask yourself a lot of questions. I'll just put an image out there. Ask yourself, you know, are they benefiting? Is this particular image benefiting what I'm trying to, you know, show or sell my product? Does this image help the user understand the point I'm trying to make? Does this image create emotional appeal? For example, does the customer visualize themselves using the product featured in the photo? And how does this image relate to my brand? You know, is it on point or is it not? You know, these are, you would think these are common sense questions, but let's, you know, put them out there because it's important. Does it speak to my target audience? Am I actually, you know, hitting the people that I want? Does the message, you know, what does the message of the image have? You know, what does it send? Is there any message being sent at all? You know, how will my visitors respond to the image? You know, like, yeah, you create an emotional thing, but you know, maybe it's a horrible terror image and they run. You know, you don't necessarily want somebody to bounce off your page. Will it change their opinion? You know, are you influencing your you know, your user, the person that's visiting your site? And will it help facilitate things like, will it help them want to buy something? You know, is the image good that way? So that's like one of the main things you want to ask yourself first is what's the purpose for an image? And now we're going to talk about like what you would do. You know, what kind of images do I use? Well, you can see my example of my share screen that's not up right now, but there was a guy up there. So one of the most important things you'll see a lot of times, especially when people are selling stuff, is they'll use people. Use real people in your images. This helps a lot. We can relate, you know, when you're talking about a product for grandma, nothing better than having a picture of grandma there with your product or whatever that is that you're trying to do. Another great thing that you can do with images, especially when using people, is to use them to point out something. A lot of times we'll see a person looking at holding a bottle and looking at it, you know, or a thought bubble or an idea or a place or whatever, you know, or something there, you know, maybe they're even looking directly at you, like engaging you. You know, you're the product, for example. So use those photos and those people when you're making that purposeful choice. Go ahead and use it to you know, in a way it's telling the story for you. So go ahead and point out the obvious. Use images to illustrate concepts, right? So here's an example. You know, we're buying a Stripe card or whatever, and you know, you put your tool on the phone and you swipe your credit card, and that's how you make a sale. Well, what's better than, you know, than having a hand held with the phone and the actual card used, boom, you know, right there, you're not having to say anything, but you're really like illustrating the concept, like, hey, this is my product, this is what we're doing, you know. So using those images and those image choices to make that happen. Another thing that's often used, and I do it too, but it's something to be really careful of, is we all like to use stock images, right? So, you know, and I'll go into that a little bit more where you can find some of those later. But stock images are great. You know, you can buy them. Sometimes they're free, but sometimes everybody's using them. So be really careful about when you're using stock images and things like that, that you're original. You know, that you know, maybe some of these places you can buy a stock image that's just yours, you know, or it's limited, so not everybody has it. So I think that that's a really important thing to think about too. Like, make sure that when you're choosing images, if you do use a stock image, think about its original content. And better yet, you know, maybe, you know what, go out and take a photograph, do it yourself, or find somebody who that's their job and that's what they do well, and you know, it'll go a long way. Or spend money and buy something from somebody and have a guarantee that it's not out elsewhere. So I think that that's something in use to be aware of. Make sure it's relevant. You know, I know a lot of these things sounds like common sense, but you know, sometimes you just want to put an image up there and it has no relevance. You know, like it looks pretty, but it doesn't really quite say give enough of a message or an emotion. So make sure that you do that. Make sure you're choosing images of quality. Don't use a blurry image. Don't use an image of low quality. Use images that have a certain look or a composition. Make sure that they actually took time to take a good picture, or if you can, crop it maybe. Sometimes it'll also go really far than an image quality, look, and composition, that all your images will have a certain similar look or appeal, and your website will flow and it won't feel, sometimes if you have all these kind of different images and different lighting, different whatever, it might not, you might think it looks good, but it might just trigger certain kind of whatevers in the back of people. So aesthetically, it's better to try to do that. Remember that images create emotion, so a dog looking up at you with sad eyes on a website that says "Save the Dogs" is going to create an emotional appeal that makes you want to save the dogs a lot more if you just have a picture of a dog playing catch. So use images that create emotions that you're trying to get from your user to use your product or to further themselves through your website. And also don't, like I said before, don't just use photos, right? So infographics, icons, how everybody knows a mail icon, right? Everybody knows a search bar icon with the magnifying glass. Everybody knows that these icons and they're conveying messages, and so think about that too when you're making image selections and how you can maybe say a lot with a little bit. Like I said, the image is worth 1,000 words, and that applies to things that aren't photos as well. Infographics, icons, logos, things like that. Make sure when you're using multiple images, again, like when I get back to that your look and your composition is right. So if you are going to use the multiple images, especially in the same area, make sure it all works. You don't want it to feel jumbled. It won't feel right to your user. And again, just kind of going off my notes here, make sure that your images and sizes and looks and everything feels the same. So sometimes, not all the times do we want like everything square and cookie cutter, but make sure things are aligned right. And maybe if you have different size images, maybe they would all look better if they were cropped the same size, something like that. So don't be afraid to play with those kind of tools out there. And another great one is like using an overlay. A lot of times you'll see like, everything's got a blue tint to the images or things like that. So that's another way to like kind of create a look and feel, to create some sort of similarity or cohesiveness in your design when it comes to images. So think about that. Think about the mood, the lighting of the images. These things do matter to you and to your user. Another important thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit too in optimization, but make sure that when you do put an image on there, you name your image file properly. Don't just give it 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, or 7, 2. Put it if it's a kid playing in the park, maybe like kid in park or something like that. Also, a lot of times, I use WordPress, so content management systems a lot of time will have a place what we call alt text, and that's something that a lot of times people who are coding will go ahead and there's a place that you can do that in code. But with WordPress or other content management systems, a lot of times when you're putting an image online, it'll ask for that alt text, and that alt text is really important. People who've been probably watching these things know that accessibility is important to me in web design, and this allows a user who may not be able to see the photo the photo is now defined for them. And you'll see that actually starting to happen everywhere. Even Facebook all of a sudden has an algorithm now for blind people where you post a picture and it kind of figures out what's on there and describes the picture. And not only will this go great for people with accessibility issues, but it'll really help your SEO ranking, your search engine optimization ranking. And that's extremely important, especially if you're selling a product and it's like black hoodie, fire skull or something like that. If you have that in your alt tag, that's going to help you and searchability. Also, a lot of the search engines will like downrank you if you don't have good alt text and things like that. So it's another way to help get your ranking up there, as well as make it accessible and, you know, help you get more searches and more hits on different search engines. So that's really important. Another thing to think about too is contextual. So, you know, make sure your images match the text and the message that you're trying to create. So here's an example. Don't show a room full of people in a classroom when you're trying to advertise a vacation in Aruba, you know, unless maybe, you know, you're like, would you rather be here or in Aruba, right? So that makes sense, right? But you know, so maybe the text is asking the certain question, and in that way it would contextually work. But, you know, make sure your images are like slightly on point. Just don't put something there because you need an image and it really doesn't make any sense, because if it doesn't make sense that much to you, it will make no sense to the person using it. So again, purpose, not decoration. Don't just decorate your website. Make it mean something. And last but not least, don't use an image. It's okay. There's a lot of websites out there that are just pretty much text-based, that are great headers, great text, they're set up well, don't have a lot of images, they don't need a lot of images to convey their message. I mean, you know, we all get on Craigslist, right? So we do see the image of the sales or whatever, but here's a website that is, you know, just text-based and it works. So, you know, depending on what your target audience, depending on what you're doing, don't think you just have to throw an image out there, because you don't. There are other ways to engage a customer that don't necessarily need an image, and don't just do it because of that. So that's kind of the use of images. And so let's talk about the yes, okay. So let's talk about optimizing images. So what is optimizing? Optimizing means making better performance, things like that. So one thing we have to really consider a lot too is now that we're designing websites, we're not designing websites, obviously, right, just for a computer screen. You know, we're designing websites for a laptop, we're designing websites for a tablet, we're designing websites for an Android phone. So we need to think about our images when we're selecting our images. You know, how are they going to look on a big screen? How are they going to look on a small screen? We'll be able to blow up that image. Is the image quality good enough on a big screen that it's not going to look horrible, fuzzy, or pixelated? You know, is the image so big, or there's so much information in the image, you know, that we want to convey, that when we scale it down to a phone, it just doesn't look right. It's not going to crop right. You know, and we call that responsive. You know, is the image able to be scaled on different screens and optimized in a way that still makes us convey the messages and the reason why we're using those images, you know? So make sure that you think about that. Now, the biggest and the most data, or the thing that takes up the most space per web page is, guess what? Images. It's not text. It's not the color of your background. It's not the header. You know, it's not all that. Maybe there's some fancy functionality you have in there that might be loading in the background, but for the most part, the bulk of our websites are, you know, the size of them is in images. So it's really important to think about that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll compress images. So we'll take an image that's, say, like, you know, 100 megabytes or something like that, and we'll try to squeeze it down to maybe like, you know, 100 kbps or something like that, kilobytes. And so I think that you know, something to think about too when you're selecting your images is, you know, don't run out and get the biggest file, or if you can, at least start, you know, to select image files that are smaller. And then I'm going to show you in a second here some tools that I use so that when I do have bigger images, you know, my target is around 100 kilobits or something like that. Sometimes I can't get away with it because the image just needs to be bigger and it needs to be richer. But that's one of my targets a lot of times, is that I'll shoot for that. So remember that images affect load times and user experience. So again, make sure that you're choosing images that will not slow your page down. I'm really very kind of aware of this because, I live out in the States and I have horrible internet, and a lot of the sites that I'm, currently in charge of are serving people that have horrible internet as well. So I'm really, always thinking about how I can design a web page to load as fast as possible. And it's also really important too when it comes to search engine optimization, again, because you will get dinged if pages take long times to load. Google will not rank you as high. So it's really in your interest to, one, the user's not going to run because they're like, man, this page is horrible, and also it just makes your life a little bit easier. So I use JPEG. That's preferred, and then I use PNG, and those are the ones I'll typically use because I can compress the image enough. So when we talk about compression too, we're talking about lossy or lossless. So basically each image, you're taking out little bits of the pixels, little bits of the dots at times to get the information smaller and smaller, but still maintain pretty good resolution. And that's what we're doing there. We're scaling, we're sizing, we're compressing. That's how we're optimizing the images. And obviously, again, it helps with the SEO. Another thing too, before I get into showing you a couple of these tools, is lazy loading. Now I use WordPress, so there are plugins and different things that allow me to do this. And what lazy loading is images are asked to load only when the user accesses that part of the web page. So usually when you get on a web page, you land on the top, things are loading and it's fine. But a lot of times there'll be, a fairly long page below that, and there's a bunch of images. Now, if all those things are loading at first and it's a fairly big page, it's going to slow down your load experience. And the person that's there is like, man, this page is taking forever to load. I'm not going to do that. So, I'm out of here. So we use lazy loading to basically load images as the user is scrolling through the website. And usually with a faster connection, you're not really going to notice that at all. And it does help us with slower connections, or, that we don't sit there and wait forever and ever and ever. I mean, sometimes it kind of is a little bit hard for us with slower connections because we still have to wait for that page to load, even though, we've already scrolled through it and we're like, where is this image ever going to load? So it's kind of a catch-22, but it's in your best interest. It's in your interest as to optimize your site and your load times if you can use, especially if you're using a lot of images on a web page, to use lazy loading. So now let's go to, all right. So I'm going to show you, real quick, I'm going to show you two webs. Actually, I'm just going to show you one, but I'll give you the other one. So we're going to go to Squish. So this is squish.app. I don't know if you guys can see that on the top, but maybe pause it, whatever, later. And this was actually turned on to me by a person when I was giving this talked originally to another group of people, told me about this one. And now I'm actually exclusively using this one as my way of what we would call optimizing or compressing an image. So this is what we would use this for. So typically you bring your own image in, but I'm just going to use one of theirs. And you would, go ahead and drop and drag your image. Hopefully this won't be too slow because, okay, great. So let me dismiss. Let me get this image down to where we can kind of see it. Okay. So you can see we have a left and we have a right here. This is the image on the left is the original image. And then over here on the right is what will be the choices we make. So there's a lot of different choices in here. So what I would first do is take this image, and you can see right now, this image is massive, right? It's got a width of 3.8, you know, it's massive. So for me, the first thing that I'm gonna do, and typically what I'll do is I'll scale this image down to about 1200 width, which is a little bit bigger than your normal screen. And so that would be the first thing that I choose. Okay, so at first I've chosen to make this smaller, and you can see already, so it's now from 279 here at the bottom left screen megabytes, it is now already compressed down to 75% quality. It is already compressed down to 118 kilobits. So that's pretty good, right? Like that's kind of what I was saying, the target's around 100. So you can see, so just for education's sake, I'm going to take this, I'm going to bring the quality way down. And now we're at 16 kilobits and 99%, and we've got a, you know, pretty good width and height here. But you can see, right? Like, I mean, how pixelated is that? How fuzzy is that, right? So there's a certain point where compression is not good, right? Because it's not giving you a really good image, and you know, image quality is important. So let's go back and you know, we'll bring it back up to 75 or whatever it was, and that's pretty good. Now at this point, Squish will just let you come over here at the bottom right, and you can download that. You can see there's lots of different other things that you can do. You can change the file image type. We're just sticking with the default one here, which I would recommend unless you really know what you're doing. So basically on Squish app, you'll see what I'm doing first is getting the size of the image itself down to a little bit more usable size. And then I'm taking the compression part of it and reducing some of the quality in order to take this image from 2.79 megabytes to a target of around 100 kilobytes. So that's Squish. It's great. I would recommend that you take all your images and do that before you even put them on your website. It'll save you a lot of headache. It's really easy to do. I'm sure with a couple folders you can manage, you know, downloading the file right into the folder that you want on your desktop, and then upload that stuff later to your website. But anyway, so that's a great one. Prior to that, I was using Kraken Io, which I was turned on to by some of the educators at one of the Sacramento WordCamps. So I have used this one. You can see it has a little bit different user interface, but I actually found this one not to be as easily used as Squish app, and now that's why I've done that. But I will recommend Kraken Io because that is another one I've used. And you can use all other ones, but I'm telling you, these online ones are great. And that is the one catch, is you do have to be online to use them. So there are other image probably compression software tools out there that you can use that are offline if that's something you want to do. Honestly, I haven't had a problem just using the online feature myself. Okay, so that is mostly about optimization. Let me just give a quick shout out here. I'm not going to put them up on the screen, but we'll just say there's Smush It is a great one. Tiny PNG is a great one. JPEG Optimizer, Opti PNG, PNG Out, and plenty other image optimizers out there. So take your pick, find what you like. You know, if you got a better one, let me know. I'd love to hear it, because images is something that I'm always having to optimize when I'm working on websites. So and it's even something that I pass on to clients. I say, here's the Squish app. You know, if you're going to upload images yourself, just run them through this. And you can see it's fairly user friendly. So people who are maybe have clients that they're educating, that's a great way to do it too. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one, which is the tools. All right. So we kind of got through the hows, and I didn't really touch on like the psychology of images, because I think that's like way too much in depth. We did talk about the hows and whats and uses. We talked about the optimization and how important that is to images. I just think it's something that needs to be addressed. And so we did. And now we're going to talk about some of the places that you can get images for your website. Now, there are tons out there. So don't just listen to me. Do your own research, ask other people. Maybe you have an Adobe account or something you might have access to. A couple of these I have paid for in the past that I'm using because I also do some merch design, so they're a great place for me to source graphics and things like that. But let me go ahead and just show you. So the first one is Unsplash, and I have used Unsplash quite a bit, and it's pretty great. It has a lot of an area of free photos, and then it also will source you to places where you can buy photos or you can buy the rights to photos. And that sometimes is a good option too, when I was saying like before, when, be leery of using a stock photo that's used 100 times. So that's a place that you can purchase them. So Unsplash is a great one. You can see they've got all kinds of images. A lot of photographers are putting these images up here. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. So you'll have to kind of go through there. I've used Unsplash more than this next one that I'm going to show you, but a lot of people also recommend this one as well. And I'm kind of showing you ones that you can get some free stuff. There are other ones that are completely not free. So you can either buy that, or a lot of times you can buy like a monthly subscription and you get access to a certain amount of sites. So the next one is Vexels. So it's very similar to Unsplash. It's a great one too. You can see they've got great images. Here, talk about look and feel, right? When I was telling you about that, and look at all these green. Look how visually that's kind of flowing right now. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about look and feel and how important that is. See, now they're going into blue. They know what they're doing. They're already marketing to you, white, and so on. So this is a great another site, Vexels, to check out. So these are ones mostly images. There are vectors and things like that. There are even videos you can see on Vexels, and I even think Unsplash too has some videos. So if you want to put some cool header or hero thing, that's that's kind of what some people are doing now, where they have a video running in the background rather than an image. There is that option with those sites. So these are the sites that I like to use for getting graphics, and obviously mostly for my merchandising, but I thought I'd put them in here. Vexy is great, and you can see they've got a bunch of photos as well as vector graphics. So this is kind of a one-stop shop here. You can see there's some free, there's some that aren't, that you can purchase. I found them to be really great because sometimes they'll even have, a PNG. I'm looking for a photo, but I need something that doesn't have a background. This is a great place to go and find out some of that. So Vexy is a great one, and Vexels is obviously another great one. Vexels is a little bit more oriented towards the merchandising crowd, but you can see, a lot of times they'll just have kind of cookie cutter things that maybe you were going to create in Canva or something like that. So they're giving you all the, the design already. You don't have to do much of it. And some things can be purchased. Some things are free. And I believe Vexys and Vexel both have a subscription. So you can, pay a monthly fee and have access and rights to using those graphics. So anyways, that's a great one. I just wanted to throw this one in here because part of what I do is doing some e-commerce, and I do some merchandising. So I've been really liking Placeit. It is one of those things you got to be careful of because it's one of the bigger companies out there that are doing this. So you'll see kind of, it's one of those things where everyone's using it. So it's something you want to be careful of when you are creating a certain amount of originality. But what I really liked about this company here was that you can see, okay, like this view right here, right? So this is a great image. You can put your artwork on it and upload that to your store. Boom, you're selling. But what they also do is these cool things like an Instagram video creator, right? So like, say you're trying to, do maybe some social media networking or things like that too, or advertising. They've got all this great other stuff, not just photos to put your product in your merchandising, but they actually even have stuff for you to make your own merchandising. So in some ways, this is almost a one-stop shop too, especially for people who are doing some e-commerce or doing some social media stuff. You literally don't have to do much. And this is another one where you can access some free stuff and you can also pay. And I've used this one, and it's been great because I can actually, instead of using the companies that they have mock-ups, I can at least have something that's a little more unique in that way. And yes, I know other people are using it, but more people are even using just the straight up mock-up that they're getting from their company. So anyways, Placit's a great one. So those are the tools, and that's kind of it for my talk. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. I think just, images, they're extremely important. They're a big part of your website. Thanks for cutting that share screen off. And they, you really want to think about it. I hope that I kind of like at least kind of shown you some basics and ideas and things to think about. There's a lot of information and a lot of different ideas out there. And also, there's also great sources of people building websites if you just want to peruse around and see what other people are doing with images. It's always changing. And now there's even, which I didn't touch on too much, and it's graphical or illustrated. There's a lot of 3D images coming out now too. People are doing a lot of 3D stuff, and that's kind of cool too. So think about images in that way. So
that was great, man, and really appreciated you mentioning the search engine optimization aspect of being accessible. It's not just something that gets you into the non-normal vision community. It actually helps you out with everybody. So
yes,
that's a cool thing.
It is.
And another thing that you mentioned too, just the idea kind of early on, it's in my notes. Take pictures instead of using stock images if you have a decent camera, because there's nothing weirder. And I use Unsplash like many folks. And there's that moment when you realize everyone used the same "we're open for business" sign when things were opening back up. So if you really want to stand out, go find a business with an open sign, take a picture.
Absolutely. I think originality does, because we do see that a lot when we're online, and you start going like, hey, wait a minute. And that has a lot to do with giving your site integrity, or like, positive, like, can I trust this person? Are they trustworthy? You see a bunch of the same images, you're like, is this like a shady site? That is a thing that some people think, so that's another reason to be original.
Awesome. One other thought, we were talking about optimization and really making sure your images are going to work right as far as file size and everything. But it's also, for WordPress users, WordPress is pretty powerful, but it's not magical, particularly when it comes to cropping images. It can do weird stuff to your pictures. So make sure you know the aspect ratio of the particular part of your site that you're using that image, or things are going to get weird fast.
Absolutely. And knowing your aspect ratios to the different platforms you're using, even if you're using social media, or if you're using, you think you're going to be targeting people on a smartphone, really think about how that looks,
Yeah, exactly. Always hit preview and see what it looks like on a phone, because honestly, a lot of folks are going to see your site on a phone.
Yeah, and for me as a WordPress user, just as a side note, I'll do all that stuff outside of WordPress. What I mean?
Exactly.
And then bring it in. And if I don't like it, then I'll go back and recrop it or overlay it or whatever. I rarely do any photo editing inside WordPress. I will say that I do have a optimizing plugin that will compress an image if it needs to be compressed. But even then, I usually turn that off. There's no automatic. But that is a nice feature for some people who don't, hey man, like that's just way above my skill level or a time or whatever. There are tools out there that will help you optimize your images, specifically on WordPress, and I'm sure on other content management systems as well.
And we talked about it before. Canva is pretty helpful for that
It
too,
is.
as far as just like if you've got a picture you want to use and you need a border, you need like to fill in a little bit of white space, just drop it in Canva. It'll, help you out. So
Absolutely, and that's actually something I didn't really touch on, but there is a lot of that software out there to help you do that. I typically don't use Canva because I'm not maybe prettying up the image. I use GIMP a lot,
yeah,
so that is an open source tool that's very similar to Photoshop. And I actually just started using Darkroom, which is another open source, kind of like an Adobe Lightroom, but that's more for like high resolution when you're trying to do photo editing. So way post, way
yeah.
before even presenting that to the web designer. You're just trying to make the stars look better. So, but anyways, like you said, there's Canva. There's a lot of software out there to help you make your photos look better too. Before not just the optimization. Decorating, putting text on there, whatever that is.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, this was a great one, Ethan. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
taking.
No problem. And then we'll keep rolling along. I'm hoping maybe we'll get some other people in here giving talks, but we'll keep rolling along. And I think the next one's going to be kind of the wrap up of this thing we've been talking about, right? So developing all these different areas so that we can create a style sheet for a website. So I think the last one we'll talk about buttons and a few other things coming the next month's talk, and then we'll tie everything together in a style sheet. And at least it'll give some people some sort of direction for designing their own site, or at least something to look at or to think about.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I guess we'll see you guys on the 4th Tuesday of next month.
Neither of us remember the date, but it'll be on calendar. It'll be on Facebook. We'll make sure you guys know about it.
I just keep looking at 4th. All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for